I understood that I had transported myself through time and space. A door had been opened up to me, and I had stepped through it. I instantly knew that this was the nest of the source of all creation, and this is where everything is created anywhere. I still did not realize that my body was back on the floor. I didn't have any awareness that I had died.
I would say it was probably at least a good 4 to 5 minutes. So he had been down a while where he did not have a pulse and he had no breathing effort. So total, what we call total cardiac arrest.
At that point, while I was sitting there enjoying all this stuff, there were a dozen EMTs and hospital staff trying frantically to restart my heart. Had I known that, I couldn't even call them to tell them, don't bother. This is great. I'm Philip Hasheider. I'm from Sauk City, Wisconsin. I live on a farm in an area called Little Prairie. I've lived there most all of my life. I have 5 siblings, and we all grew up on a typical Wisconsin dairy farm, making hay and stacking bales in the barn, milking cows, chasing pigs that got out, and that sort of thing that happens on any farm. I attended a 7-room rural school, which was 2.5 miles from our farm. The change of going from a rural area high school to college was a significant step up for me. And it's actually where I met my wife, Mary.
I'm Mary Hasheider, and I've been married to Philip almost 39 years. We met at the University of Wisconsin in Madison while we were in college.
We got married, and we decided we wanted to get back to our rural area.
When our son was due to arrive, we got talking about how we wanted to raise him and decided that we wanted to raise him as we had been raised, where when you're in the community, you might be at the grocery store, the school, the church, and you see people that you know. It's that sense of community that you're not all related, but you're all part of this community. And we wanted them to experience that.
I had the opportunity to come back to the farm, and so we did. And we raised our 2 children there. My roots, my European roots here, go back to 1845, including me. The generations would be myself, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my great-great-grandfather in Wisconsin. So 5 generations have lived here. When I walk out in our pasture, I know at some point I'm walking on the same footsteps that my dad did, my grandfather did, his father before that, and that's pretty humbling. In 2014, 2015, there was a slow, imperceptible rise in my blood pressure, especially the bottom number. And I couldn't attribute it to anything. I was working on a farm, I was active, I was eating what I thought was an appropriate diet, but it was still slowly inching up.
Philip came in to see me largely on his own accord, and he needed a physical and just to see where he was at. He was hypertensive, his cholesterol was elevated.
He looked at it, my previous numbers, and he said, yeah, this could lead to a stroke. Having grown up in a rural community where farmers I knew had strokes, I knew I did not want to have one because in most cases they were incapacitated. It really shifted the whole dynamics on the farm. And so when the word stroke came out, it was like these alarm bells ringing. He suggested that I look at the Wellsprings program, which was a branch of our local hospital.
And we tried to motivate him, and Philip sort of needs to be convinced that it's the right way to go or not, and he decided to do that and participate in our wellness program, and he went over to our physical fitness program and was partaking in that.
They had a fitness center which was monitored, and they would help construct a diet to make sure that I could lower my blood pressure. And everything started out fine. I mean, they got me into a slow workout, and I was improving. My blood pressure was coming down. Only later did I realize, after I'd seen my hospital reports later on, that the damage had been done. It was 11 o'clock on an early October morning, 2015, when everything changed. That morning I had arranged to have the tires on our car replaced at a local shop in Sauk City. So I normally would take my workout bag, my gym bag, with me if I went in, because if I had enough time, either I would try to do an exercise at the fitness rehab center before or after something I did in town. Well, that morning I drove in and I realized I was really early for the tire appointment. So instead of turning right to go there to get the tires changed, I turned left because I could go to have a short workout and still make the appointment. So that's what I did. I turned left, drove to their parking lot, went downstairs, changed clothes, came back up, said hi to the staff people that were in the room, and went and did a few stretches, and went to the arm curl machine. And I did a modest 20 arm curls. I stood up, and the strangest thing happened. I looked down at both of my forearms because they were tingling, like they had fallen asleep. And I had just been on the machine. So I'm looking at my forearms one moment, and the next moment I find myself in a completely different dimension.
And that's when he had a syncopal episode. And in other words, he passed out. And the most common cause of syncope is ventricular tachycardia. And that's what happened.
It was like being in a huge open amphitheater, realizing that there's no sky, there's no stars, there's no moon, there's no galaxies. And that's when I noticed that I kept moving up and down and wondering what that was. And I realized that I was floating on these waves of energetic energy coming towards me. And not only towards me, they were passing through me. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I mean, I had no fear. It just felt so warm and accepting, and I didn't know where I was. I didn't even think about knowing where I was. I just was there.
He was in the process of dying. There's no question about that.
My name is Sandy Drury, I'm an exercise physiologist. My role is wellness supervisor at Sauk City Healthcare. I was in a phone call and I heard, well, I wouldn't want to say like a thump. I heard a yell out from someone saying, "Call 911, get the AED." Immediately stepped out into the fitness center, saw one of our Sauk City Healthcare employees doing CPR, grabbed the AED, came back in, and went about attaching the electrodes to Phil. At this point, Phil was pale, did not look well. We knew he was not breathing. He had no pulse.
I remember looking at what I thought were my hands, and they were translucent. I could look through them, and the energy waves would pass through my hands, my arm, my body, but it felt like I was being washed with liquid love as it was passing down through me. I look up and I see this enormous, voluminous, golden yellow pulsing sphere that filled up the whole vision of what was around me. It was from this that all of these energy waves were coming. It was just a golden, glowing, pulsing eminence that was sending out. I could feel the love, the total love, the welcome, the acceptance. And as I was looking at it, it was like 10 million suns being packed together. And yet I could reach out and touch it and not get burnt. And it was these waves that were coming and enfolding me and asking me to merge with it. Not once did I think this is really unusual. It just felt so good if a energetic vision of me can feel, that's what it felt like.
In all the years in medical fitness, I have never had to use, I've never ever done CPR, much less use the AED. So as I'm going through attaching the AED, I'm at the same time kind of looking out the window, glancing out the window, watching for the EMTs to arrive, hoping, please get here as soon as you can.
My name is Chris Henry. I was a volunteer EMT at the time. We heard the tones go off and said, "Man down, unknown problem." I hopped out, I grabbed the defibrillator, I grabbed the ALS bag, and I just ran across the parking lot and went in. They had already been starting to do some compressions on him. I got down, I started to just do kind of my assessment. No heartbeat, no breathing, nothing.
There are two types of death. Clinical death, which is when your heartbeat and your breathing stop. Biological death, on the other hand, is when that all happens, but it's happened for too long and there's no way that you're coming back. It's a permanent situation. Philip was clinically dead. His heart had stopped. He wasn't breathing on his own.
And there's a window between 3 and 5 minutes, basically. That's sort of the golden window that you want to get a defibrillator going as quickly as you can. You want to shock that rhythm to get it back to normal again.
And I'm pretty sure Dean was the first one that came in, and he was like, "What do you need?"
My name is Dean Darling, and I'm an advanced AEMT with the Sauk City Ambulance Service.
I was like, "We need to move him so we can get to him," and just without even hesitation, he grabbed the treadmill and just yanked it and tossed it. And so it's like, all right, we got access. Let's start doing our thing.
At some point, I intubated Phil with what's called a King airway. It's an advanced airway that after we don't get a response to where the person wakes up, we intubate them to try to improve the oxygen level in the bloodstream by inserting this tube and then using an ambo bag with an oxygen supplement to bring up the level of oxygen level, and hopefully we get that refractory from the defibrillation to work.
And then I saw little sparks, like if you had a sparkler, little sparks shooting out all over the surface of this golden eminence. They were going in all directions, billions and billions, coming off the surface and heading out. At one point, I did hear what I thought was music. But the closer I listened, it was tones. And it was vibrating out with these energy waves. And I interpreted it as being a beacon, because what I had seen coming in were other sparks from the other direction, kind of like me, because they were all floating out here in this eternal dimension. But it was like we were all honing in on this vibrational sound, this beacon that was extending out through wherever it went. It was like it was calling us home. I instantly knew that this was the nest of the source of all creation. And this is where everything is created anywhere. So I know that at some point, this is where I was born, this is where you were born, this is where everyone and everything was born, as we understand a birth, a starting point. So that each one of us carries the DNA of that creator energy. And we take that with us wherever we go.
We switched out the pads to our defibrillator and took over compressions. It's tiring because that's hard work. We usually change out every minute just because you can get winded pretty quick and you want to make sure that the compressions are good and working.
When I used to teach CPR classes, we would tell people, they're dead. You're not going to hurt them. So oftentimes people are like, well, I may break a rib doing compressions, which if they have broken ribs and they're alive is better than not doing anything or not doing your compressions deep enough.
If you don't push hard enough, then you're not compressing to get the blood ejected out of the heart and circulating in the body.
What we're trying to do with CPR, early defibrillation, yes, we want to get the heart started, but we want to perfuse that brain.
Once the heart has stopped, there's no circulation of blood, which means there's no oxygen getting to any part of the body anymore. The brain isn't getting the oxygen, the heart muscle's not getting any oxygen.
Because once you get past that 5-6 minute point with no cardiac compressions, it's adios muchachos. You're not going to make it.
And the longer it goes without, the more tissue dies. And if you lose too much, there's no chance of getting them back.
Survival and cardiac arrest for all services, especially in rural areas, is very, very low. It's probably, 5%.
I decided to take a look to see what else was there. So I turned, and what I saw was what I can best explain as an infinite multitude of dimensions and universes that were suspended out in this eternal space. The best way I've been able to explain it to anyone is if you take everything we know about our universe here, the billions of light years across whatever direction you want to go, all the comets, all the planets, all the solar systems, whatever, and you take all of that and you compress it down to a single sheet of paper. And then you take that and you suspend it out here in this eternal space. And then you do that with another complete universal system, and you put that right next to it, and another one next to that, and another one next to that. And you keep going as far as you can imagine in infinity in one direction, as we understand directions, and then you go the other way. You go vertical, you go down. There were all of these suspended universes and dimensions out in this eternal space. But yet each one of them had attached to it an energetic filament that reached back and attached to this, what I'll call a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this divine creator. And it was sending the same welcome and love and acceptance and knowledge to each one of these universes and dimensions suspended out in this space. So I turned around, and what I saw I can best explain as infinity. Because the emulsion of eternity acted like a magnifying glass, so that the farther I looked, the clearer everything became. To see into infinity was it didn't surprise me. It was just like, wow, this is really neat. I understood that I had transported myself through time and space. A door had been opened up to me, and I had stepped through it. I still did not realize that my body was back on the floor. I didn't have any awareness that I had died.
I would say it was probably at least a good 4 to 5 minutes. So he had been down, a while where he did not have a pulse, and he had no breathing effort. So what we call total cardiac arrest.
At that point, while I was sitting there enjoying all this stuff, there were a dozen EMTs and hospital staff trying frantically to restart my heart. Had I known that, I couldn't even call them to tell them, don't bother. This is great.
That's when the second shock was delivered. Everybody thinks that you're jump-starting somebody. You're not. What you're doing, it's like an eraser on a chalkboard. You're wiping away all this electrical activity. So you're wiping it all out. Hopefully the heart will reset itself. And that's what happened with him. We started seeing this organized rhythm.
Looking at the monitor, we knew that, hey, I think his heart's starting to come back.
And then, lo and behold, we had a pulse.
The moment that I realized all of this was before me, in less than a blink of an eye, I left that dimension and I found myself back here.
At some point, he started waking up and looking around, and of course he's very confused because last thing he knew, he was working out.
At that point, he still wasn't making much sense, You could tell he was still confused.
Confusion is very common because there's not usually as much oxygen getting to the brain, and the brain's still trying to focus and trying to make sense of what just happened.
We tried to calm him down and get him loaded up to go to the hospital.
By the time we got him into the ambulance, he was actually talking.
I have little recall, in fact, no recall, of the 8 hours after my collapse. I was told that by several of the EMTs, that I was talking with them, answering questions, making jokes, but I have no recollection of that whatsoever. I was not cognizant of my surroundings until 8:30 that evening. And I couldn't understand why I was lying on this gurney. The first thing I recognized was a clock on the wall. And it said 8 o'clock. I said, that can't be right. The person standing next to me said, why? I said, well, I went to exercise at 11, and time doesn't run backwards. And he said, well, it's 8 o'clock at night. I realized I better keep quiet because I have no idea what he's talking about. It was like I had one foot planted in this eternal dimension and another foot trying to find the floor in this one. And I couldn't. Absolutely nothing made sense. And it took me an awful long time to fully understand what happened. After I left the hospital, slowly things started to coalesce. I could start seeing and recalling what happened. What I experienced is very vivid. It wasn't a dream. And even after all this time now, almost a decade later, I can go through the whole scene of where I was, what I experienced, what I felt while I was in that dimension, and it still is the same. Nothing changes. It's like it was tattooed onto my soul when it came back. I would share some of this with Mary, not knowing if she would understand or think I was crazy.
It came out in such pieces, and it wasn't even, he didn't know what really near-death experiences were.
I had difficulty finding words to express some of these things. I mean, some of this is beyond human vocabulary.
The only times I would get snippets of it was like sitting in church and listening to the choir.
And there was a piece of music. I just closed my eyes and I could feel it. I could feel being pulled back to where I was.
Or he'd be looking and he'd say, I'm trying to find the gold, I'm trying to find that yellow, I'm trying to find that color, and he'd be going and looking for this color that he had seen. So this is over a period of months that would take him to just kind of remember things.
Eventually I had bills to pay. I had to, follow the rules of the road like everybody else. Some people think that once you've had an NDE, everything goes like butter. And that's not true. Because I have my days when I get frustrated, I have my days when I get angry, I have my days when I want to chuck everything and walk away from this life. Initially I thought, man, why do I want to stick around here? And it's not because I don't love my wife, it's not because I don't love my family, it's just because everything was so far beyond great where I was that this is really not quite that level.
The underlying sense was that when you have such an extraordinary experience, that you really would rather be back in that experience. And we talked about that. And I can understand that part of it. However, you have, a family, you have friends, you have people here that care about you. And so how do we fit then?
I came downstairs one morning for breakfast. She waited until I was ready and she said, well, do you want to hear what you said last night? And I looked at her and I thought, I didn't say anything last night. She said, oh yeah, you did.
I frequently was on high alert around Philip during his recovery, especially at night when he was sleeping. I didn't sleep very soundly because I was always listening. Is he breathing? Is he okay? And then one night, he was mumbling in his sleep. And I didn't know if he was in pain. I didn't know what was going on. And then he started talking.
I said, okay, what did I say?
And that's when he sat up and just started repeating, "I don't believe it, I don't believe it."
And she asked, "What don't you believe?"
And he said, "Why I came back." And I said, "Well, why did you come back?"
And she said, I told her, I was told to come back to be a conduit to those who do not have any hope or think there is any.
And he related that it was to be a conduit of hope.
When she told me that, I had the answer I had been searching for as to why I returned and was not just lucky, as some of the doctors at the hospital had said, "Well, you got lucky. You were at the right place at the right time." I knew it was more than that, but I had no answer to it. But when she said that, then I knew that was the answer to the question I was really seeking. So that has been the motivation to write about my experience. That has been my motivation to talk to people, to groups, to do interviews. For me, it's just a matter of, this is what I can do to help others. And since I've been doing that, I have found there are many others who have had an experience, a near-death experience, or a spiritually transformative experience, or something that is out of the ordinary, and that they don't have to be afraid to share it. I'm just a fellow traveler with everyone else. I don't consider myself special. I was given an extraordinary experience. The interesting thing about that day, looking back on it, was that became a demarcation line in my life, because it's given me insights that I didn't have before. It's giving me peace that I haven't had before.
It was like before his experience, he was kind of floating off in his own path. After his NDE, he was much more present.
I've experienced numerous patients who have had near-death experiences, and they've all said they're profoundly changed. And some are more articulate about it than others, but the two things that is profound is the degree of acceptance that they felt, and also the boundless love that they felt. And as a result of that, they truly feel they're different people.
I would say that the reason we are here is to accept and acknowledge the divinity in everyone around us. The person in the car next to us, the person in the grocery store, whether we like the people or not, because we are all part of the divinity of the source of all creation. And hope is the pathway on our journey. The hope of which I speak has to do with not being afraid of what comes next. We are so tied to physical things here that we don't want to give them up.
And that's what death, I think, is a fear that we're going to lose our identity, we're going to lose who we are, then they're going to forget, we're just going to go to this abyss, and that's going to be the end of it.
This life that we understand is not the end, even though we may decease. That's what human bodies do. But the internal essence, our internal spirit, is what continues on. That's all that death is a transition from what we experience here to something far greater. And to me, that is the hope that I'm trying to explain to people, is that, yeah, we're going to lose some of the stuff that we have here that we can't take with us, but we're going to keep going. We're going to keep having other experiences as we go on through eternity. Because that essence of us that goes on is part of the God creation. And that doesn't get destroyed.